With the release of version 2.6, we got another Dainsleif quest with more information regarding Khaenri'ah and the Abyss. We also might receive more details regarding Genshin Impact's ending. Now, let's get straight into this video. So, for context, I'm going to be covering pretty much the main stuff that happened in the Dainsleif portion of the Archon Quest in version 2.6. So, the main thing is that, well, we met up with the man himself, Dainsleif, but I noticed that the Traveler was going very suspicious of his actions and motives throughout like the entire story. The Traveler was very concerned with the fact that Dainsleif kind of just popped up out of nowhere, and even after he explained how he showed up, it really didn't matter to the Traveler because the Traveler now kind of has this sense of distrust towards Dainsleif, and now it's getting kind of interesting, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I want to move on to the next point, which is that we started learning how Abyss teleportation may function. And this is obviously, again, explained by Dainsleif because he randomly popped up in the chasm out of nowhere, coincidentally, right next to us. And whether that is a coincidence or not, we really don't know. We can only really go off of his wording of what happened. But basically, he explained that the teleportation doesn't work like starting from point A and then going to an exact point B or a specific point B exactly, but rather you start from point A, but then it's up to the user or the person using the teleportation to determine where that point B is. And so that point B could literally be anything that they could imagine or where they want to go to. And you either have to be lucky and predict where they're going to go to, or just go next, because you really can't do much about it, or at least for what we know. And I noticed that this kind of works similar to how we, for example, navigated through Makoto's realm of consciousness by like constantly thinking about A and her fighting the puppet in order to be able to find her exact location, because otherwise without that, we probably would have ended up in some random place in time. So by putting our consciousness towards specific things, it works similarly with the Abyss teleportation, where the user uses their consciousness and teleports to a location that they want to teleport to. Now, the next thing is that we encountered Halfdan, who was one of Dainsleif's previous soldiers. And now, first of all, this does confirm Dainsleif's position as the Twilight Sword, as well as just in general being a higher up in Khaenri'ah. So for the most part, he's very credible in that sense. So there's no thing to like doubt about his position in Khaenri'ah and whether he was there or not. Pretty much confirmed that he was indeed there and that he did in fact act as a higher up official and gave the last orders before Khaenri'ah was fallen. And honestly, that scene made me cry because Halfdan, it was a very emotional scene and I did cry to that scene. It was very sad. But moving along, we also learned why hilichurls have masks, how they act the way they do, and why they even came to the chasm in the first place when we first noticed that hilichurl activity was increasing towards the chasm. So obviously the masks hide them from the horror of their own self-image. Obviously we learn about this from Dainsleif. A lot of the stuff that we learn about this is mainly from Dainsleif himself because he's experienced it for so many years. So he tells us a lot of information regarding the Abyss and the citizens who were affected by the curse, including himself, throughout this quest. But back to the hilichurls. So those masks definitely are a way to like mask them from like being in complete terror throughout like their duration of just being stuck in a never-ending nightmare. And I'm pretty sure that them being able to see themselves would probably make it worse. So there's that. And then it was obviously confirmed that these are previous Khaenri'ah citizens who just happen to also be cursed with immortality. It's just that the only difference between like them and like Dainsleif or Halfdan is that they kind of lack a sense of consciousness to where they can fully or completely engage with other people. So that's just the only difference really between like hilichurls and people like Dainsleif or like the Abyss Heralds or anyone of those sorts. And the chasm sort of acts as a resting place for these hilichurls, especially when they're tired of living in this never-ending darkness. This has to do with the upside down fountain that seems to alleviate the pain of the curse, because it even alleviated Dainsleif's pain. And then that was obviously before the Abyss Lector then did all that stuff, and then it cause a lot of torment for them. So there is all that going on. Now next we learn that the Abyss's plan is to both overthrow Celestia and restore Khaenri'ah and its citizens. And back to the Abyss Lector, we saw them trying to completely cleanse the curse and like redo all the effects, which most likely wouldn't have worked. Even if there was like a slight chance it would work, most likely it wouldn't work and it would just incinerate all of them, because trying to cleanse something that's that powerful would probably do the reverse of what your intentions are trying to do 9 times out of 10 realistically. So us breaking that device halted the restoration of the citizens, but the other plans obviously still hold fix, with them wanting to overthrow Celestia and trying to restore Khaenri'ah, although restoring Khaenri'ah probably not as likely now, because now they don't really have the tools for now to do that. Whether they find another device or another way to do it, I don't really know, but whatever. And then this quest ends with Dainsleif telling us that by our next encounter, we choose which side we're on. And that was not a way I really wanted that quest to end, but it's Dainsleif, so of course we have to end it with a twist and a gotcha moment. But honestly, it really brings us back to an important aspect of this game, is the fact that the Traveler is slowly gaining their own sense of individuality throughout this game. And now this brings us into the theory section about how Genshin Impact will probably truly end. And so my personal theory is that I hope there is a multi-ending story for this game. So I'm going to refer back to the Teyvat storyline teaser, where he mentions, and I'm paraphrasing here so this isn't going to be like the exact quote, but he talks about how you've ended your journey, but one final door remains. Defeat me, prove to me that you're worthy of saving her more than I. Then you may weave the threads of fate as you so please. And basically this kind of summarizes how the endgame will probably be like. So this will be like post Nizhaya, during like Saritsa's act of overthrowing Celestia maybe. We'll have a heavy focus on Khaenri'ah and Dainsleif, most likely. Have to do with leaving this world. Will probably require us to fight Dainsleif to prove that we're strong enough to go against our sibling, because there's no way in hell we're going to fight our sibling if we can't even face off against Dainsleif, because according to Dainsleif, and based on that quote, it's likely that him and the sibling are either like on equal power, or like the sibling might even be stronger than Dainsleif himself. Probably, maybe, I don't know though. I don't know their fighting like levels, but that's probably the case there. And so when we get strong enough to fight the sibling, depending on if Hoyoverse feels like going this route when the time comes, we will get 3 options, I would say. So it would either be fight the sibling and leave the world, fight the sibling and either accidentally or intentionally kill our sibling, or the last option being fight sibling and then decide to overthrow Celestia together with maybe Dainsleif and the Saritsa maybe even. And I've essentially broken these down into just 3 endings with good titles. So there'd be the true ending, there'd be the tragic ending, and there would be the celestial ending. Now for these endings, it would be nice if leading up to it, there'd be some form of criteria, but for the most part, it's most likely that they're not going to do anything until like the Khaenri'ah section if they were to do a multiple ending thing. So for that sake, for these endings, I'm only taking into account the Khaenri'ah section. And I'm just going to assume that all the Archons and important figures in the story regarding Celestia and Overthrow will remain alive and will continue to exist throughout the plot. So first, let's go over the true ending theory. So now, in this ending, we first win against the sibling. Then the sibling will probably try to convince us to fulfill the mission to overthrow Celestia and restore Khaenri'ah before moving on to the next world. We will probably dissent or disagree and try to convince them to leave Teyvat for their own good. And then we just leave Teyvat or whatever else happens next. But in the end, main thing is that we leave Teyvat. And now this theory honestly makes the most sense and probably has the highest chance of happening and just mainly being the solo ending of the game. Because honestly, this is kind of what everyone's expecting. This is what is the most straightforward, the most logical ending. No one really dies. It's more of a peaceful, straightforward, expected ending that leaves majority of the fan base satisfied with their journey for the most part. So now onto the tragic ending. Now this is the ending that I personally really want, because I am a sucker for tragic endings. I like it when everything turns dark and everything goes AWOL. I love these kind of endings. So let's get into it. So in this ending, we have the situation where we went against a sibling. The sibling tries to convince us to help overthrow Celestia and restore Khaenri'ah before leaving. Obviously, we would then disagree, try to convince them to leave Teyvat ASAP because, like, we are trying to get out of here. We don't want to be here anymore. We're tired. Obviously, the sibling will then also dissent and would refuse to leave till otherwise. And then obviously we would have a choice here, and I'm just inserting this as a thought in this theory. So the choices would be either you could just leave solo and just be like, well, bye, just leave. And like, that's it. Leave solo, kill them on the spot, or try to convince them again. And then if you try to convince them again and it doesn't work, and then maybe like there'd be a weird scene where like them in an Abyss Herald, or maybe just them solo, I don't know, whatever the case could possibly be if this ever really existed, would try to do a sneak attack, you counterattack, and then accidentally kill them in the process. That's probably how it would go if a tragic ending like that did exist. You would probably accidentally kill them because 9 times out of 10, actually trying to choose to kill them willingly would probably not make sense, honestly, unless you really had a super strong will and determination to the point where you could ignore the fact that they're your sibling. But that probably wouldn't happen. It would probably be an accidental kill, and I would feel like that would be a moment where that would happen where you counterattack something, and then it's like, oops, kind of just killed you in the process, and then they're dead. And then obviously after grief, you can then also make another choice between either choosing to stay in Teyvat with Dainsleif and maybe overthrow Celestia, kill Dainsleif even, and maybe you randomly just decide to throw the blame on him for causing everything to happen or having everything lead up to where it is now. Or you can make the choice to just leave the world by yourself and continue on to your next journey. Now, obviously, this ending is very sad. Probably won't happen because it's a really sad ending. When I said tragic, I meant tragic. Like, I meant it. But it would be nice to see something like this, at least, something like this, if they allowed the game to take such a dark turn. And for me personally, I would be satisfied, and this would be like a good tragic ending for me personally. And now onto the last ending, which is the celestial ending, which could also be another probable ending in this game. Now in this ending, we would win against the sibling, and the situation would obviously be, again, them trying to convince us to overthrow Celestia and restore Khaenri'ah. And then maybe the choice you make is you just agree right away. And then depending on if Dainsleif agrees, whatever, yada yada, it would be probably you, sibling, maybe Dainsleif, and maybe even you join the Fatui and the Saritsa, and possibly even the Abyss, and everybody just works together and just overthrows Celestia completely. And honestly, whether it succeeds or not doesn't really matter, because the whole point of the ending is the fact that you automatically agreed to want to overthrow Celestia in the first place. And that automatically puts you in the celestial ending category. Alright, so now, closing thoughts. I really hope Hoyoverse considers, at the very least, adding choices as like determining factors for how the game progresses as we get closer to the end. Obviously, they don't have to do it right now, but like chapter 5, chapter 6, once we get into those chapters, I really hope they add like butterfly effect type choices, where they start actually affecting how the game really progresses. And like the choices that we do make actually do have an impact on how the rest of the game continues on and so forth. It could even be in like the Khaenri'ah section, like just the Khaenri'ah section is where all of your choices really matter. Even just one section that was like this, I would love that, personally. This would also, in my opinion, make the story a bit more engaging for both returning players and new players towards the end game. If they do make the ending a one ending option, I personally want it to be the tragic ending, period. Personally, endings that are tragic or take a really dark turn always strike me as top tier automatically, because I like things that are unexpected or outside of the ordinary course of action, and especially with a game that has a story going on this long, and we already are in the ride for like another 2, 3, maybe even 4 years before we really even get to the end. Shoot, it could even be longer than that depending on how they choose to develop the game in terms of like how many patches for each version, etc, etc. So we're talking like a whole story and like a generation's worth of like a story built up in this video game. So with a game like this that has also lots of context and lots of books and lots of additive lore, as well as a main character who's slowly developing and progressing with each quest and developing their own individuality, I would really like something like this to exist in this game, or even just like an option to do this, or just anything like this, honestly. I like butterfly effects, I like tragic endings, they just strike me as good, but most likely they won't go this route and they'll just make the single ending just that. The traveler and their sibling happily ever after leave Teva, woo, and ta-da. Alright, and that was my theory on the possible ways that Genshin Impact could end. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, or if you thought my theory was outlandish. It's whatever, it's a theory, I was just throwing it out there. But yeah, let me know what you think and what your thoughts about possible endings in Genshin Impact could be, and also your thoughts on the quest overall. Let me know if you liked it. I personally liked the quest a lot. It was a lot of information, and not even just the fact that it was lore, it was just emotionally striking, and it was just really good overall. And the chasm is also a really good place. I liked exploring the chasm when I did it, although it took a really long time. So yeah. Anyways, thank you for watching this video, and until the next one, bye bye.